There we go. Now that my inescapable hell of consumerism is appropriately mouse themed, let's talk about Descendants. So, Descendants is a very interesting franchise with a lot that can be said, good and bad, about it. And I'm not gonna, by any means, get into all of that today on either side. But in general, I wanted to make this video just kind of a general overview, one on one. Me explaining my opinions and experiences with this franchise as somebody who, grew up with it. I was 14 when the first one came out. I went to high school with the VKs. uh, and so it's a franchise that's meant, a decent bit to me, for better or worse at times. Uh, and, it's a series that is probably not going to be going away in general or from my life anytime soon. And so I think, I probably got some stuff to say. And that's what this video is going to strive to be a place about. Before, going into the fifth film, just a general way for me to gather all the pieces in one place and talk about, everything that's led up to this fifth film, how I'm feeling going into this fifth film, all of that. And so that's what this video is going to try to be. I have a list of bullet points written down on my phone that I'm going to try to hit. Might not hit all of them, but might not have much to say on all of them. But, I've been wanting to do like scripted videos and stuff for a long time. I don't have a script for this because it's coming out next month. The next one's coming out next month. I don't know if I want to sit down and formally write out everything that I would have to say about Descendants in this moment over the span of a good week or two, and then rush to get this video out there. I think I'm just gonna, do it loose. I got enough going on right now. I'm good on that, thanks. So yeah, this isn't gonna be the fanciest video essay in the world, or like a proper formal think piece, but it's going to be me, you, the general you, all of you, and we are going to talk about this thing. It's hot today. I'm sorry. So the original trilogy is the part of the series that, it's the logical start to talking about it, but it's probably the part that I honestly have the least to say about. Because, I don't think they're terrible movies. I like them, but I don't think they're incredible movies. I just think they're fun. They're turn your brain off for an afternoon fun movies. And they don't need to be more than fun movies to be good. Because I think they're good at being fun movies, And, that's probably all they were trying to be, is fun movies. So, I don't know why I would have to sit here and convince myself or an audience that they need to be taken seriously as these magnum opuses of Disney Channel. They're just neat. And they're allowed to just be that, So I don't have a whole ton to say about the films one way or another, at least of the original ones, because enough ink has been spilled to where there's not much more. There's not much more that I can say about the positives or the negatives there. I think maybe the spiciest take I have to give about the original trilogy is that Mal, doesn't always do it for me as a protagonist. I feel like she's good in the first movie. She stagnates, I think, I'm biased, because I like these characters more. But, I think generally it would have been more interesting if, say, Descendants 2 focused more on Evie, because in Descendants 1, Mal's whole thing was, am I going to just turn out like my mother, or am I going to be a different person? That's been resolved. There That's been resolved. We're good there. We can still do more with Evie, you know, and we can still do more with other characters. And so I don't know if, you know, of course, keep Mal in the movies, but I don't know if you necessarily need her to be the focus of the universe every time, you know, especially when we introduce Uma, who I think would have been a very interesting protagonist to focus on going forwards. You know, there's a franchise I like that does that. Can you guess which one it is? Like, I think if they did the Sunset Shimmer approach with Uma, you know, had her be the villain of Descendants 2, but then after that have Descendants 3 be, you know, her story. I think that would have been nice. I think that would have even been a really interesting way to tie in with the existing story of Descendants 3 with the idea of Audrey becoming the villain. Because then we'd have this VK who has not come over to Auradon yet, that was the villain last time and was sent off as the villain last time, instead of these villain kids who are already heroes now. I think it would have been an interesting way to tie those two together, but instead, you know, Uma's still part of the team in Descendants 3, but she's playing second fiddle to Mal still. And, you know, I just... I liked Mal a lot in the first movie, but just over time, just fell out of, you know, needing to see that character be the center of the franchise. So I'm going to make some people mad when I get around to Rise of Red, but that's going to wait. I feel like when that original first movie came out, my top 3 favorite characters were probably, you know, like Mal number 1, Jay second place, Carlos third place. But by the time that the series was over, you know, the trilogy was over, my favorites of the original trilogy are easily Uma, Evie, and 3 Audrey. Specifically 3 Audrey, not 1 Audrey. So, you know, that just sort of... That's a good barometer to to the trajectory Mal took for me personally as an audience member. Another sort of funny thing about the original trilogy, looking back on it, was you had the book series, and in addition to the book series, you had the cartoon, and other stuff like that, of questionable canonicity, in that it's not canon, but the wiki doesn't think that it's not canon. But, you know, like, listen, I wanted all that stuff to be canon, too. I read the book when the first movie came out. It's just that the book established that Captain Hook had a bunch of kids and everything. And then the second movie came out, and it was established that Captain Hook had this one kid, and it never got mentioned of him having any other siblings at all in either of the 2 movies he was in. And then, on top of that, Gaston had a bunch of kids, all named Gaston. I'm just saying, Gil's name isn't Gaston. I guess it's a nickname, or it's a chosen name. And if it's a chosen name, good on him, and good on everybody for respecting that. But we have no reason to believe necessarily that Gil's name is Gaston the whatever, unless the books demand it. But then that's back to the same question of, do the books count, or are the books just trying to make themselves count retroactively? It's like the MCU with Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., you know. Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. and everything was always, you know, doing everything they could to respect what happened in the movies. And then the movies did not respect what happened in the shows and just ignored it, you know? Is that what we got here with the books and with the cartoon? Because with the cartoon, that one was even funnier when that happened. Because you had Frankie Facilier in the cartoon. And then in the third movie, you had Celia Facilier. And in the third movie as well, they make this big deal about, wow, we're finally bringing more VKs over to the Isle. with a Facilier who isn't Frankie, and never having mentioned that Frankie exists within the film, I feel like that would have come up at some point if it was canon, but it's probably not. And I know that because, spoilers, whenever we get around to Rise of Red does that, and these movies didn't. So I'm just saying. Basically, in Rise of Red, there's a line early on between Cinderella and Prince Charming about Chad. Chad is this character. Here he is right here. Here's his sister and his parents, established in Rise of Red. Now, I'm glad that Auradon respects adoption as much as they do blood parentage and everything. But it's very, very funny to insist this entire time that all these characters in the books and the cartoons are canon. They just never come up when we finally get another movie coming out with characters who are the parents of an existing established character in the franchise, and they make special note of acknowledging that character. It paints a pretty clear distinction between the canonicity of the movies versus the canonicity of the other stuff. But maybe the wiki's not ready to hear that yet, you know? Now, the original trilogy and the characters part of it were always going to end one way or another. And I think they did on a good note with the third one. But I don't think, anyone could have expected that one of the contributing factors to that would be the unfortunate, untimely early death of the late and great Cameron Boyce. It is, truly one of the hardest parts of the franchise to talk about. And, for a lot of reasons, people didn't want the franchise to continue after his passing, which is reasonable. I don't blame anybody who thinks that it should have ended with him. But we are in the world where it didn't. And so I find it, I don't know necessarily if it's right to think of it more as a thing to where we should look forward and see what they do now. But that's how I decide to engage with it. I think that it's okay for this thing to continue going, as long as they don't try to pretend nothing happened, as long as they respect him properly. And so when Descendants 3 came out, and in fact, he passed away, and it was made public that he passed away before the movie came out and everything. Like, it aired with a memorial that was removed from the DVD and Disney Plus releases. But it was... It's hard. It's hard to talk about. It's hard to dwell on a whole lot, and I cannot even imagine how hard it is for the people who knew him. If it's hard for me as an audience. And so, yeah, just... I don't really know what else I can say about it aside from, giving the space in the video to acknowledge that and truly let us sit there for a moment. But that is to say, at the time, even I knew that they weren't going to drop it. It was too big of a franchise. And so, for better or worse, I knew there was going to be more Descendants. And, I was right about that. And so, I made it very clear. I didn't have a big public platform to cry it out from the rooftops. But, so I didn't make it very clear to the public, but I made it a very clear divining line for myself. That... as long as they let it be about different characters, because, I didn't want to see The Adventures of Mal and Friends #4, but he's not here. I didn't want it to continue with these characters who had just gotten their ending, because continuing their stories without Carlos there, without Cameron there, that would be weird and bad and uncomfortable, and no one would like it. And so, naturally, if they were going to do more, I wanted it to be with new characters, with a new generation of characters to get to explore and expand this world. Which would be an incredible segue for this video if I didn't need to vent about Royal Wedding first. Because Disney did not do that first. They did that approach second. They thought that we wanted more Mal and Friends without Carlos first, to wrap up the fact that Mal is engaged. Oh, but what if we never see if there's a wedding that happens? It's the world of Disney. I'm pretty sure the marriage is gonna happen. So I've never seen Royal Wedding. I don't intend to. I try my best to refrain from saying, I'm never gonna watch this, I'm never gonna read this, I'm never gonna play this. Because how can I know that, 100% of the time? So it's hard for me to say that I'm never going to watch Royal Wedding, because it angers me so deeply. But just, I don't see any need for me to watch Royal Wedding. I don't. I don't think it was necessary. I don't think they needed to make it. And, it's, again, exactly the opposite of how I wanted them to go about continuing this universe if they were going to. And so, just in general, I don't need it. I didn't need more Mal and Friends when Descendants 3 ended. I don't need it all these years after Royal Wedding has come out that I've still not watched it. So I'm good. It's safe to say that I am good. I do not need Royal Wedding in my life. And eventually they did go in that direction that, I felt was a more respectful way to continue the series with Rise of Red. And let me tell you how many people suddenly had a problem with that didn't have a problem with Royal Wedding. I gotta stop. I need to stop. I, like most people in, the older generation of the Descendants fan base, I wasn't super thrilled when they announced that Rise of Red was being made. And I didn't think it was going to come out until the trailer came out for it. But when that trailer came out, I liked it. I thought it was fun. I thought it was cool to see something new being done with new characters that wasn't going to make things feel Royal Wedding-esque. And as time passed from that initial teaser, we of course got a proper trailer. We got the release of some of the songs. We got the release of the red version of What's My Name. I said it before, I like Uma. You got me there. That's one original trilogy character I'm happy to see more of. Because there should have been more done with her in the trilogy. And so, my heart's not stone. I allowed myself to experience joy and excitement for this thing that I loved coming back in the only way that I was okay with it coming back in. I was happy that they were doing that instead of Royal Wedding. I'm still not past it. And when the movie finally came out, I stayed up to midnight on the night that it released on Disney Plus to catch it. And As usual, when I stay up to midnight, intentional or unintentional, ruined my sleep schedule for 2 months before I was able to get it back on track. That's aside the point, because it was worth it this time. uh, I was not expecting the film to be spectacular. I didn't think it was going to wound me as brutally as Toy Story 4 did. And when I'm recording this, Toy Story 5 is coming out. But I wasn't, I was going into it thinking, after this movie is done, maybe I'm not going to need to rewatch it ever again in my life. But I don't think I expected that I was going to enjoy it as much as I did. I talked about before how the Descendants original trilogy, not perfect movies, but they are really fun movies. If this is a franchise that I go to for fun movies, Rise of Red is the most fun movie of the franchise. So it might be my favorite if I had to pick one. I'm gonna be real. I think in general the cinematography is really solid. I like the performances. I like the songs. Yes, even the Gelatin song. Have you seen the original trilogy? Gelatin is not that bad. Stop acting like the originals are so much better. Do not get me started on saying that Gelatin is the worst part of the Descendants franchise and oh, this movie is so terrible, because I saw the TikTok audio of the Gelatin part. Oh, holy. But all that to say, I like the movie. And I'm looking forward to more from this creative team. I trust them with my life. I feel like the biggest distinction between what the original trilogy is and what Rise of Red is, and why I enjoy Rise of Red, a bit more, is that the original trilogy reads as a series of movies that, if you told them, you remind me of Shark Boy and Lava Girl, they'd take it as an insult. Whereas if you told Rise of Red, you remind me of Shark Boy and Lava Girl, they would thank you for the clear and obvious compliment that it is to be compared to one of the most fun live-action children's films of all time. I also really like how respectfully Rise of Red handles the passing of Cameron Boyce. I can't speak to everyone, especially with the "it's what Carlos would have wanted" line. I can see that being a bit much for a lot of people. But as a fan, that watching that scene for the first time the night the movie came out, it was a healing experience. It feels odd to say, because I didn't know him. I was just a fan of his work as an actor. But still, it was something that really, positively impacted my experience with the movie immediately out the gate. That I like to commend it on, and compliment it on. And from my understanding, it was a healing experience as well for China McClain, and probably for Melanie Paxton. More ink has been spilled than I could probably, ever imagine about how the passing of Cameron Boyce impacted Dove Cameron, Boo Boo Stewart, Sophia Carson, China McClain, especially. And understandably so. They were the castmates that he was the closest to. They were the ones that the Disney Channel kids at home were the most interested in hearing about how it was impacting them. But I cannot imagine what that must have been like for the older castmates either. Jeez. I'm only 25 right now. And if I met like a 14, 15-year-old kid and I saw them grow up into an adult in real time, and then right as they're entering their 20s, they just abruptly pass away, that would ruin my life. I'm not like, gee. uh I cannot imagine what it was like for them to have to wake up that morning and the first thing that they hear from their castmates is that this kid that they all knew, they've outlived this kid. That's horrible. And so, I'm glad that not only did China get to have the experience of that scene, because, again, from what I've read, I could be misreading, but from what I've read, it sounds like it was, a positive experience for her. I hope that was the same for Melanie Paxton, who was also there in that scene, and who deserves for us to discuss whenever the subject comes up of how it probably impacts her as well. So overall, I enjoyed that scene. I think that was a good scene. Since I gave my top 3 characters of the original trilogy, my top 3 for Rise of Red is Red, Bridget, Ella. Just, I don't know if it's that necessary for this video, but you have it now. All in all, I'm really excited for Wicked Wonderland. That's Descendants 5 for everybody who hasn't kept up. I just, if it's even half as fun as Rise of Red was, we're in for a good time. I like these characters. I trust this current creative team. I like the songs. I think the cinematography is the best the series has ever looked in Rise of Red and what we've seen so far of Wicked Wonderland. So, like, I think the actual technical craft that the movies are being made with is improving a lot, and that adds a lot of points for me. Now that I'm not a teenager. And just I'm just excited to see where it goes. I don't know what else I can say aside from I'm happy they're doing more. Which again, with how much I wasn't fully excited for Rise of Red until we were getting closer to it and started actually seeing trailers and everything. When it was just first announced and we had the idea of, oh, they're saying Kylie Cantrell is going to be the lead, I was just, whatever. I didn't think much of it and everything. I didn't think it was even going to be close to my favorite film in the series. Now it is. So I'm excited for more of that. I'm excited for more of what Descendants currently is. And I'm really excited to see what Pink is about. I'm really excited to see what Max is about. Everyone else, all the other new characters they're adding, sure. I don't feel super strongly, but that's because I haven't seen the movie yet. If you told me before I saw Rise of Red that Morgie was going to be even half as fun to watch every time as he was on screen as he turned out to be, I don't know if I would have believed you. So, there's plenty of time for all the other new characters they're adding to also be great parts of the movie. It's just, from here on the outside, with what little we've seen so far, I'm just mainly, looking forward to those two. But I'm looking forward to those two, and I'm looking forward to more of Red and Chloe and Bridget and Ella, enough to where that's all I need. Just the fact that we're getting 2 more characters who I'm really interested to discover and learn about on top of the ones from the previous film that I liked. That's all I'm asking for, and that's I'm getting even more than that. So yeah, there's no reason for me not to be excited for this movie at this point. So I'm practically counting down the days, as you can see by me making this entire video. One of the things I'm really interested in, and I'm probably entirely off base on this, is that from the song that we've gotten, Perfect Princess, I'm starting to pick up a theme from this one song alone. As crazy as that sounds, that Pink probably has a bit of a rough time with feeling like she's being overlooked. Because, you have the two instances of, instances. I'm a great speaker. With the two instances of, and Pink is in on all the fun. And when the boys are talking about two heroes on the rise, and she cuts in with three and then goes across the screen. That to me reads as a pattern of whether or not she realizes it. She has a bit of a rough time feeling overlooked. And I'm gonna find, and that's an interesting thing to do with this character, because she didn't exist until Red and Chloe's time travel in Rise of Red. And so it's going to be interesting if, on some way, subconsciously, either her or everyone around her kind of gets the feeling that she's not supposed to be there because she wasn't originally there. And that's gonna be some deep stuff for a Descendants character to have to deal with, for a Descendants movie to discuss. And I find that interesting and cool if that does happen. But then again, I'm also the person who, before there was even a second episode to Digital Circus, and I was just watching the pilot over and over again, losing my mind over it, thought that Kinger was going to be able to see the future. And that didn't happen. In essence, there is a lot to say about Descendants, because Descendants is a lot of things. And to me, one of the biggest ones is that it's the story of troubled kids who have gone their whole lives being told, this is all you can be, this is all you're going to be. And they get to say no and be something else. They can be the hero of the story for once. And, I was a troubled kid in high school, just like the VKs. And so that was a very empowering thing to have in media. And I'm grateful that I got to have that. And I'm also grateful that because the series is continuing, all the kids that are growing up with Red and Chloe, they're also going to have that. That's very much what the first film of theirs is about, Rise of Red. And I cannot wait to see where that goes in Wicked Wonderland. How further we can do that, again, I'm really excited for Max. That's why I'm excited to see what Max Hatter is about, because I like when a Descendants character is a troubled kid who has some stuff to overcome. It's why I got kind of tired of Mal and would have liked if Uma got to be the main character after her introduction. That's what the series is to me and what it means to me. And because the series exists, there's no way at all I'm the only person who feels that way about it, who was impacted by those films and those characters, especially, for my age. There's no way I'm the only one. So, from these movies existing, these imperfect, messy, chaotic, weird movies existing, there is more joy in the world. There is more hope in the world. And I think that is a beautiful thing. That because these movies exist, the world is on even just the tiniest scale. It does not feel like it these days. Trust me, I know. That the world is a better place after these movies existed. And I think that's beautiful because it means that you and me, who grew up with those movies, we're never going to forget Cameron Boyce. And since the series did not end with him, neither will any of the kids growing up with Red and Chloe. And I think that's beautiful too. And I'm really happy that the series is continuing and probably will continue for a very long time, because it means that it's going to be there for kids when they need it. You know, I'm a Toy Story fan. I like when things are there for the people who need them. Thanks, Toy Story 4. I gotta let it go. But, yeah. Descendants has not gone anywhere, you know, in a bad way. It has gone places in a good way. That's why I'm happy about Rise of Red and Wicked Wonderland. But Descendants has not gone away. It's probably not going to go away for a while. And I'm happy about that. And it's okay if, you know, you don't want part of it because of Cameron Boyce and what his involvement with the series means to you enough that after he passed, you don't want to touch it again. You don't want it to be unearthed and continued over and over again. I get that. I get that. It's okay. It's okay to have an opinion on a movie series that does not line up with what the YouTuber is saying. And that doesn't mean that the YouTuber is wrong either. It just means that we can have different thoughts about this stuff. I grew up on the wrong era of the internet. But I'm thankful for the series that we've gotten. I'm thankful for the series that we're continuing to get. I'm thankful that Descendants exists, as frustrated as I can be with certain parts of it sometimes. And I guess that's really all I guess I ran out of stuff to say. So I don't really have a proper sign off in in my 10th anniversary Disney Infinity video. I had to randomly improvise one, which was, I've been Wyn-Spiracy and you've been my tinfoil hats. But, you know, I thought it was really dumb, and I laughed it off in the video. But it's charming. I like it. It might grow on me. It might be the thing. But if you liked this discussion, then assuming Zombies 5 does happen, I'm going to be doing it for that series too, so come back for that. And I've wanted to do videos like this, you know, maybe not in this room, maybe not of this production quality, or lack thereof. Maybe not exactly as I envisioned it all these years. But I've always wanted to make videos that were more than just, you know, me playing a video game and saying shit over it, you know. I've wanted to talk about things on YouTube for pretty much, you know, most of my life now. Over half of my life now. Ever since I discovered reviews on YouTube, review videos, and from their video essays as well. And now today, I you know, I used to watch those alongside Let's Plays. Let's Plays was the thing that first brought me to YouTube. I don't remember the last time I've watched a single Let's Play video, because all day, every day, I'm just listening to video essays and movie reviews. So this is a space on the internet that means a lot to me, and to bring something that means a lot to me to that space, as imperfect and messy as this video is, just like the franchise itself, it really does mean a lot to me if you're still here this far into the video watching it. And I sincerely thank you for watching. If you want to ever come back, if I ever have the motivation to put another one of these out there again, then you know the buttons to press, you know the bells to ring. I'm not going to take up any more of your time. Just thank you for what you have given me. I've been Wyn-Spiracy, and you've been my tinfoil hats.